Number 10. Stopping tasks the moment they feel uncomfortable. The first time you stop isn't dramatic. There's no collapse, no announcement, no clear moment where you decide to quit. It starts quietly, the instant a task stops feeling comfortable. The moment effort replaces ease, your brain flinches, not because the task is impossible, but because discomfort feels like danger. And every time you obey that feeling, something subtle gets trained inside you. When you stop the moment discomfort appears, your brain learns a rule. Discomfort equals exit, not failure, not learning. Exit. The nervous system doesn't distinguish between physical pain and psychological resistance very well. To it, confusion, boredom, friction, and uncertainty all register as threats. So when you pull away, even slightly, your brain rewards you with relief. That relief is powerful. It teaches avoidance faster than success ever teaches persistence. Over time, this pattern rewires your effort threshold. Tasks that once felt challenging start to feel unbearable. Your tolerance for strain shrinks, not because you're weak, but because you're conditioning yourself to escape at the first signal of friction. You begin to confuse discomfort with misalignment. You tell yourself, this doesn't feel right, when what you really mean is, this feels effortful. The most dangerous part is that nothing looks broken on the outside. You're still busy, still planning, still trying. But internally, your brain has learned that stopping is safety. Progress requires staying present inside discomfort long enough for the nervous system to realize it isn't fatal. When you don't, you never cross that invisible threshold where resistance turns into momentum. Every time you stay, instead of stop, you teach your brain a different lesson. Discomfort is survivable. It passes. It transforms. But every time you leave, you reinforce the habit of quitting before growth even has a chance to begin. This is how quitting becomes automatic, long before you ever say the words out loud. Number 9. Switching goals when progress slows. Progress doesn't usually disappear, it slows down. And that slowdown is where most goals quietly die. When momentum fades, your brain starts whispering a dangerous lie. This must not be the right path. The excitement that once fueled you evaporates, and in its place comes boredom, doubt, and impatience. That's when the switching begins. At first, switching goals feels intelligent, strategic even. You tell yourself you're optimizing, pivoting, refining direction. But underneath that story is a deeper conditioning process. Your brain starts associating worth with speed. Fast results mean good choice. Slow progress means wrong choice. Over time, this trains you to abandon anything that doesn't reward you quickly. The problem is that almost all meaningful progress moves slowly at first. Early effort is inefficient. You're clumsy, uncertain, and producing little visible return. This phase isn't a sign of failure, it's the cost of entry. But when you switch goals the moment progress stalls, you never stay long enough to benefit from compounding effort. You reset yourself back to the hardest part over and over again. Each switch gives you a short dopamine hit. New plans feel clean. New goals feel powerful. The discomfort of being behind vanishes temporarily. Your brain learns that novelty is relief, commitment is strain. So instead of pushing through the flat, silent middle of progress, you keep restarting your motivation from zero. Eventually, this creates a pattern. Enthusiasm without depth, vision without endurance. You become someone who starts strong, but never stays. Not because you lack ability, but because your brain has been trained to escape the moment growth stops being visible. Real progress often looks like stagnation before it looks like success. When you stay anyway, you build a different internal muscle, the ability to tolerate delayed feedback. That's the point where most people leave, and where outcomes finally begin to separate. Switching feels safe, staying feels risky, but only one of them teaches your brain how to finish. Number 8. Consuming motivation instead of building discipline. Motivation feels powerful because it arrives without effort. A video, a quote, a surge of emotion, and suddenly you feel capable of anything. But that feeling is borrowed energy. It didn't come from action, and it doesn't last without action. When you repeatedly consume motivation instead of building discipline, your brain learns to wait instead of work. Each time you seek motivation before starting, you reinforce a hidden rule. I act only when I feel inspired. That sounds harmless, even reasonable, but inspiration is unstable. It depends on mood, novelty, and external input. Discipline, on the other hand, is internal. It's built through repetition, not emotion. When you rely on motivation, you outsource your ability to act to something you don't control. Over time, this creates a subtle dependency. You scroll, watch, listen, and prepare, telling yourself you're getting ready. But preparation becomes a loop with no exit. Your brain gets rewarded by the feeling of intention without paying the cost of execution. You feel productive without producing, safe without progressing. The deeper problem is neurological. Motivation spikes dopamine before effort. Discipline releases dopamine after effort. When you train yourself to chase the spike instead of the follow-through, effort starts to feel pointless. Why struggle when you can feel motivated again instead? This is how starting replaces finishing, and consumption replaces creation. Discipline feels dull at first because it doesn't excite the nervous system. It stabilizes it. It teaches your brain that action doesn't require permission from emotion. The first time you act without motivation, something important shifts. You stop waiting for a feeling and start trusting a decision. Motivation makes you feel ready. Discipline makes you reliable. One fades fast, the other compounds quietly. If you build the second, you won't need the first anymore. Number 7. Quitting mentally before quitting physically. Long before you ever quit outwardly, you usually quit inwardly. The body keeps moving, but the mind has already stepped away. This is the most invisible form of quitting, because from the outside, nothing seems wrong. You're still showing up, still doing the motions. But inside, you've already decided how this ends. Mental quitting begins the moment you stop believing your actions matter. When effort feels symbolic instead of consequential, your brain disengages. You start doing the bare minimum, not because you're lazy, but because you've quietly concluded that the outcome is already decided. This conclusion often forms without evidence. It's built from fatigue, past disappointments, and the fear of hoping again. Once you quit mentally, every action becomes heavier. Tasks feel pointless. Time stretches. Resistance grows. Your nervous system senses the contradiction, movement without belief, and interprets it as threat. So it tries to shut you down with distraction, numbness, or exhaustion. This is why mentally quitting feels so draining. You're carrying the weight of effort without the fuel of intention. The danger is that mental quitting rewrites your self-image. You don't just think, this won't work. You start thinking, I'm the kind of person who doesn't finish. And once that identity settles in, your brain begins protecting it. It looks for proof. Small mistakes feel huge. Progress feels fake. Doubt becomes automatic. But mental quitting isn't permanent. It's a state, not a truth. The moment you recommit internally before results change, your energy shifts. Actions regain meaning. Effort reconnects to purpose. You stop performing tasks and start participating in outcomes again. Number 6. Avoiding tasks without immediate feedback. Some tasks feel heavier not because they're harder, but because they stay silent while you're doing them. No likes, no praise, no visible progress bar filling up. When there's no immediate feedback, your brain feels lost, as if effort is disappearing into a void. So it starts resisting before you even begin. The human brain is wired to track cause and effect quickly. When action leads to instant response, motivation stays alive. But when feedback is delayed, the nervous system struggles to stay engaged. It asks a quiet question: is this working? When there's no answer, uncertainty grows, and uncertainty feels unsafe. So your brain nudges you away, convincing you to postpone, switch tasks, or do something that confirms you exist and matter right now. Avoiding feedback. Silent tasks trains a dangerous expectation. You start believing that effort should always feel rewarding in the moment. You unconsciously devalue slow work, invisible work, foundational work. The kind of effort that builds skills, strength, or identity over time starts feeling pointless, even though it's the most important. This avoidance reshapes your attention. You gravitate toward tasks that respond instantly, even if they don't move your life forward. Checking, refreshing, tweaking, reacting. Your brain gets used to short loops of validation, and long loops of growth feel unbearable. Not because you can't do them, but because you've stopped trusting outcomes you can't immediately see. Number 5. Seeking reassurance before acting. Before action, a question appears. Is this okay? It sounds harmless, responsible even. But when you repeatedly seek reassurance before acting, your brain slowly hands its authority away. Instead of trusting your own judgment, you train yourself to wait for permission, approval, validation, certainty from someone or something outside you. At first, reassurance feels stabilizing. It reduces anxiety. It quiets doubt. When someone confirms your choice, your nervous system relaxes. That relief becomes the reward. Over time, your brain learns a pattern. Uncertainty equals pause. Reassurance equals safety. Action without confirmation starts to feel reckless, even when it isn't. This habit weakens internal confidence in a very specific way. You stop asking, "What do I think?" and start asking, "What will they think?" Your decisions become delayed not by lack of intelligence, but by lack of self-trust. Even small choices begin to feel heavy because you've trained your brain to believe that acting alone is dangerous. The deeper cost is subtle. Every time you wait for reassurance, you postpone learning. You don't discover whether you were right or wrong through experience. You borrow certainty instead. That prevents feedback from shaping you. Growth stalls because mistakes, the very thing that builds judgment, are avoided through external approval. Eventually, reassurance seeking becomes a hidden form of avoidance. You tell yourself you're being careful, but you're really buying time to not act. The world keeps moving while you wait for a green light that never fully arrives. Confidence isn't built by being correct all the time. It's built by deciding, acting, and adjusting. The first time you move without reassurance, anxiety spikes, but something else forms underneath it, self-direction. And once your brain learns that you can survive acting without permission, hesitation starts to lose its grip. Real progress often happens quietly, beneath awareness. Muscles grow while resting, skills sharpen while struggling. Futures are built in phases where nothing seems to change. When you stay with a task that doesn't talk back, you're training patience at a neurological level. You're teaching your brain to act without proof. The moment you stop demanding immediate feedback, effort becomes freer. You stop negotiating with uncertainty and start working anyway. That's where long-term confidence is formed, not from applause, but from consistency and silence. Most people wait to feel hopeful before they re-engage. That's backward. Hope returns after belief is practiced, not before. Stay mentally present long enough and the body will follow. Quit inside, and the body just hasn't caught up yet. Number 4. Waiting to feel ready. Readiness feels responsible. It sounds mature to say, I'll start when I feel ready. But readiness is a feeling, not a requirement. And when you wait for it, your brain learns to delay action indefinitely. The problem isn't that you're unprepared. It's that you've mistaken emotional comfort for permission to begin. The brain prefers predictability. Starting something new disrupts that. So it generates reasons to wait, more clarity, more confidence, more time. These reasons feel rational, but they're often fear wearing logic's clothes. Each time you wait, anxiety drops slightly. That drop becomes the reward. Your brain associates postponement with relief and action with threat. Over time, this trains hesitation as a default. You don't consciously choose to delay. It happens automatically. Opportunities feel distant. Tasks feel premature. You tell yourself you're being patient, but what you're really doing is avoiding the discomfort of beginning imperfectly. Readiness rarely arrives before action. It forms during movement. Confidence grows while doing, not before. Skill sharpens through friction, not planning. When you wait to feel ready, you skip the only process that creates readiness in the first place. Number 3. Over-researching instead of starting. Research feels productive because it creates the sensation of control. When you over-research instead of starting, your brain stays busy without ever becoming vulnerable. You gather facts, compare methods, analyze outcomes, and tell yourself you're being thorough. But beneath that activity is a quiet avoidance of exposure, the moment where effort becomes visible and mistakes become possible. The brain uses information as armor. The more you know, the safer you feel. Uncertainty drops, anxiety softens. That relief becomes reinforcing. You start believing that one more video, one more article, one more perspective will finally make you ready. But readiness never arrives because the real discomfort isn't ignorance, it's action. Over-research trains your brain to confuse understanding with progress. You feel closer to the goal without moving toward it. This creates a loop where preparation replaces participation. Your mind stays stimulated, but your life stays unchanged. The danger isn't lack of knowledge, it's that knowledge becomes a substitute for courage. There's also a hidden perfection trap. Research lets you imagine a flawless start. No wrong moves, no wasted effort. But perfection is static. Starting is messy. And when you delay starting to protect an ideal version of success, you end up protecting nothing at all. Each time you research instead of act, you strengthen the belief that action requires certainty. But certainty only comes after contact with reality. Skills sharpen in friction. Clarity emerges from correction. You don't learn what works by thinking. You learn by doing and adjusting. The moment you start before you feel fully informed, anxiety spikes. But something else happens too. Learning accelerates. Feedback replaces theory. Reality replaces imagination. Over-research keeps you safe. Starting makes you capable. This pattern quietly reshapes identity. You start seeing yourself as someone who's almost there, always preparing, always close, never starting. The future becomes a place where life will finally begin, instead of something you shape in the present. The moment you act without feeling ready, your nervous system panics briefly, and then adapts. That adaptation is growth. The fear doesn't vanish, but it stops controlling timing. You begin training your brain to move despite uncertainty. Readiness is not a signal, it's a side effect. The people who finish don't wait for it. They let action create it. Number 2. Letting small failures reset your mood. A small failure shouldn't have the power it does. A missed day, a weak attempt, a single mistake. But when your mood collapses after minor setbacks, your brain learns something dangerous. Errors define the day. One slip becomes permission to abandon effort entirely, not because you can't continue, but because your emotional state has taken over the steering wheel. This happens because the brain loves clean narratives. Success feels coherent. Failure feels disruptive. When something goes wrong, your nervous system reacts as if the entire direction is threatened. Stress hormones rise, perspective narrows, and suddenly the mistake feels bigger than it is. You don't just feel disappointed, you feel off. And when your mood drops, motivation follows it down. Each time you let a small failure reset your mood, you train emotional fragility. Progress becomes conditional. I'll keep going as long as nothing goes wrong. That condition is impossible. Growth is built on error. But your brain starts interpreting mistakes as signs you shouldn't be here, rather than signals of adjustment. This pattern is especially destructive because it feels justified. You tell yourself you're responding honestly, but what you're really doing is allowing emotion to override intention. The day wasn't ruined by the mistake, it was redirected by your reaction to it. Over time, this creates inconsistency. You're productive only when things go smoothly. The moment resistance appears, your internal state collapses and effort stops. Not because the task became harder, but because you tied progress to emotional stability. Resilient people aren't calmer. They're less reactive. They don't let one data point rewrite the whole story. When you continue after a small failure, you teach your brain that mood doesn't get to decide direction. Effort becomes stable. Identity strengthens. A bad moment doesn't require a bad day. The faster you refuse that emotional reset, the faster momentum returns. Number 1. Rewarding avoidance with distraction. Avoidance doesn't feel like quitting. It feels like relief. When a task creates tension, your brain looks for escape, and distraction offers it instantly. A scroll, a video, a message, something easy, something familiar. The moment you choose that instead of the task, discomfort drops, and that drop becomes the reward. This is how avoidance gets trained. Not through failure, but through comfort. Your brain learns that dodging effort leads to pleasure, while facing effort leads to strain. Over time, this rewires your reward system. Hard things stop feeling meaningful. Easy things start feeling deserved. You don't just avoid work, you justify the avoidance emotionally. The danger is subtle. You tell yourself you'll return after the break, but the break becomes the point. Each time you reward avoidance with distraction, you strengthen the association. Resistance equals treat. Focus equals deprivation. The task doesn't just stay undone, it becomes heavier the next time you approach it because your brain already knows a better option exists. Distraction also fractures time. Minutes disappear unnoticed. When you return, guilt appears. That guilt makes the task feel even worse, pushing you toward more distraction. A loop forms where avoidance creates stress, and stress demands more avoidance. You're not resting, you're numbing. Eventually, this shapes identity. You start seeing yourself as someone who just can't focus, when in reality, you've trained your brain to expect pleasure whenever effort appears. The problem isn't lack of willpower, it's that avoidance has been consistently rewarded. Breaking this pattern feels uncomfortable at first because you remove the payoff. But the moment you sit inside resistance without escaping, something powerful happens. The urge peaks, then fades. Your brain learns a new rule. Effort doesn't need compensation. It is the path. When distraction stops being a reward, avoidance loses its power. And for the first time, quitting doesn't feel tempting. It feels unnecessary.